Hey, welcome to Chinese Novel Audio Wave. Check out our playlist for more amazing novels. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a new audiobook. Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 21, Enlightened. Huai, I really can't thank you enough. Without you, I truly wouldn't have known what to do just now. A man in his 30s, his eyes red, was wiping away tears. If it hadn't been for Liang Qu stepping in to cover his autumn tax, he would have been hauled off to Lanzhou to dig canals. It would have been a near-death experience, and even if he'd managed to survive, who knows how long it would be before he could return. By then, his elderly father and wife would be left to fend for themselves, struggling to raise two young children. How could they possibly keep going? How could they not fall apart? Chen Qingjiang pulled his son Shunzi over and pushed his head down. Shunzi, quick, kneel and thank your water bro. Whoa, Chen Shu, no need for that. Really, there's no need, Liang Qu said, startled, quickly pulling Shunzi back with a wry smile. I helped you out this time, so Shunzi has to kneel to thank me. But didn't you help me out last time, Chen Shu? Shouldn't I be kneeling to you too? Are you hinting that I haven't done enough and I need a reminder? Well, Chen Qingjiang wiped his tears again, speechless, and didn't insist on kneeling any longer. Seeing this, Liang Qu relaxed a little, though he couldn't help but think how unfair the world was. Poor people like them had no way to rise above their circumstances. In Yixing City, fishers worked tirelessly their whole lives, barely earning enough to feed and clothe their families and pay their taxes. Even if they were lucky enough to catch a treasure fish, it wouldn't change much. They might enjoy a few small feasts, but even a simple cold could take their lives. Educating their kids was out of reach, not to mention martial arts training. Perhaps joining the army was a way out, but that was gambling with your life. Most likely, they'd lose their life, and any riches would go to someone else. Shui's got a big heart. He filled in a whole stone of rice, he just handed it over like that. Even though he's studying martial arts, it can't be easy for him either. He probably had to empty his own pockets, people murmured as they passed by, amazed by what they'd just witnessed. Liang Qu didn't respond. He hadn't planned on drawing attention to himself. In times like these, there was no reward for acting out of righteousness. If anything, he would rather stay under the radar. Brother Li, could you carry Shunzi back home and let his mother know? Chen Shu and I will take Grandpa Chen to the clinic. That whip strike must have hurt pretty bad. Shunzi was only 6, and after the shock he'd just been through, he was worn out from crying and was practically asleep on his feet. When Liang Qu had led him earlier, Shunzi had bumped his head against his leg several times. If he didn't get proper rest, he'd likely fall seriously ill, making things even harder for an already struggling family. Of course, Li Libo agreed, his expression complex as he looked at Liang Qu. The two had only been acquaintances, not close by any means. It wasn't until after Bald Zhang was taken down that their friendship grew, though it was mostly a superficial bond of shared meals and favors, like lending each other fishing gear. But now, Li Libo realized he hardly knew Liang Qu at all. A whole stone of rice, nearly a tael of silver. Where had Liang Qu, who was studying martial arts, even come up with that money? He'd likely go hungry himself after this. For what? Li Libo couldn't figure it out, but he knew Liang Qu was someone extraordinary, like a figure from one of those stories told by wandering storytellers. Thanks for the help, Brother Li. No trouble at all. I couldn't spare a stone of rice, but I've got the strength to carry a kid. With Shunzi on his back, Li Libo gave a nod and headed off without another word. And thank you, Shui. Enough with the jokes, Chen Shu. Let's get to the clinic before infection sets in, or it'll be trouble. That whip from the official was brutal, leaving a bloody welt on Chen Renxing's back. At his age, it was too much. He'd passed out from the pain and needed immediate treatment. Infection. What's that? It's when a wound gets dirty, and it starts festering. Oh, then let's hurry. The two quickly carried Chen Renxing to a small clinic in Yixing City, where a doctor began treating his injury. As the doctor unwrapped the wound, the sight of it, raw and bloody, made them flinch. Liang Qu carefully watched the doctor's technique, He first cleaned the wound with boiled, cooled water, then applied medicinal powder and wrapped it in steamed white cloth. It seemed this world didn't have a term for infection, though the concept was understood. Your father is elderly, and such a wound needs careful attention. Fortunately, it's not too serious. I'll write a prescription, and he'll just need to take the medicine on time. Thank you, Doctor. Xiao Zhang, please take these two to the pharmacy. Right this way, gentlemen. After gathering the herbs, Liang Qu furrowed his brow, pointing at some of the chunks. Could you swap these out for something with sharper edges? The assistant, Zhang, looked slightly awkward but complied without comment, replacing the herbs as requested. Chen Qingzhong seemed puzzled but didn't question it directly. With the consultation fee, the total comes to 8 Qian and 7 Fen. That was steep, almost a whole tael of silver, for a simple wound. Chen Qingzhong asked, is it possible to put it on credit? Yes. The assistant prepared an IOU smoothly, with clear terms for date and interest, showing he'd done it many times. Once they were outside with his father on his back, Chen Qingzhong finally asked, Shui, why'd you have him switch those herbs earlier? Those herbs didn't have sharp edges. Generally, that means they're stale, either reused and dried out again, or maybe they'd gone moldy and were cleaned up. The first isn't too bad, just less effective, though more expensive. But the second could make you sick. Just a precaution. Chen Qingzhong was amazed. Where'd you learn all this? Shui had grown up under his watch, with no formal schooling. Yet, in the past 2 months, it was as if he'd become a different person. Chen Qingzhong had already heard from the elders back home that Shui was now skilled in martial arts, and an expert fisherman. Now, he realized Shui also knew all kinds of impressive knowledge. Liang Qu scratched his head, but before he could answer, Chen Qingzhong offered his own interpretation. Shui, you've truly been enlightened. Amazing. Liang Qu laughed awkwardly. Yes, let's go with that, I've been enlightened. In their culture, sudden improvement or change was often called enlightenment. Someone who went from struggling academically to excelling, or from being shy to a love guru, or from an amateur fisherman to a master, was said to have been enlightened. Perfect, saves me from having to make up an excuse. It's a shame. If Brother Liang could see your achievements now, he'd be so proud, Chen Qingzhong said, suddenly quiet. After a long pause, he added, I'll repay that stone of grain as soon as I can. Liang Qu was about to say it wasn't necessary, but seeing Chen Qingzhong's serious expression, he figured he wouldn't listen anyway. No rush. Pay back the clinic first, and make sure Shunzi and Xiao Kui aren't going hungry. If repaying me causes them to fall ill, it'd be a waste. Chen Qingzhong nodded. The two men walked silently towards home. Chapter 22, Young Master Zhao III. Chen Qingzhong carried his elderly father home. Di, who had already been anxiously waiting at the door after hearing from Li Libo, rushed forward as soon as she saw her husband, ready to help him inside. When she saw Liang Qu standing nearby, she choked up, nearly kneeling to thank him on the spot. Fortunately, Liang Qu quickly stopped her, gently lifting her back up. Shui, I don't even know how to thank you. When my husband left to pay the grain tax today, I just had this uneasy feeling something might go wrong. But I never thought it'd be something this serious. If he'd actually been taken to dig the canal, that would have been the end of us. A few days prior, Chen Qingzhong had mentioned to her that Liang Qu had started gaining some skill in martial arts. Di had been upset about it at the time, thinking, what's the use of borrowing grain? Isn't it just feeding an ungrateful mouth? Liang Qu had been spending money to learn martial arts while relying on their meals. Di had never expected that her husband's small act of kindness would come back to save them from disaster. All right, it's over now. No need for tears, Chen Qingzhong said, trying to console her awkwardly. Go on, cook something nice for our guests. He then carried his father inside and laid him down to rest. Liang Qu was initially going to refuse the meal invitation, but considering he had no money and no food, he accepted. At dinner, there were only 3 dishes of wild greens, 1 fish, and a small plate of pickled vegetables. At least the fish was fresh. Spices were expensive, so unless it was a treasure fish, fresh fish tended to taste fishy. Most fishermen ate cured or smoked fish, as it was easier to store and tasted better. Only those in dire poverty, who couldn't even spare salt, would cook fresh fish. Chen Qingzhong looked a bit embarrassed. This is all we have left. When I have money again, I'll treat you two to something better. Li Libo waved it off. No worries at all. Yeah, this is plenty. Better than having to cook for myself, Liang Qu added. The meal was simple, but it was enough to fill them up. The next day, Liang Qu still didn't go back to the martial arts school. It wasn't to keep a low profile, but because if he didn't go fishing, he'd starve. Right now, Liang Qu was truly penniless. After fishing all day with Ah Fei, he returned to the fishing gear rental, selling his catch to Lin Songbao. Upon seeing him, Lin Songbao clicked his tongue in admiration. I heard about yesterday. Who knew there was a real hero hiding right here in Yixing City? You're something else. Liang Qu glanced at him. Being a hero will get me a few extra copper coins. Of course. Why not? It should have been 102 yuan, but I'll make it 110 for you. How about that? Liang Qu raised a brow. You serious? Why not? Look, our fishing rentals might be steep, but that's just business. I, Lin Songbao, have the utmost respect for people like you. Rounding it up doesn't hurt, there's still a profit. From now on, I'll make it even for you every time, so you won't be shorted. Liang Qu chuckled. Impressive. He hadn't expected the son of the fishing gear rentals owner to be such a person, he was surprised. With his earnings, Liang Qu headed to the martial arts school on the third day, figuring any more absence would be impolite. Upon arriving, however, he learned that their instructor, Huai, had been on leave since the previous day. Their new instructor was a fighter named Lu Xiaohui, who was somewhat weaker than Huai but had also broken through 2 martial barriers. While taking a break after practicing Ape Fist, Li Libo whispered to him, I heard from Brother Shang that Hu might be on the verge of a breakthrough. Next time we see him, he could be a genuine martial artist. Liang Qu thought it seemed about time. Preparing fish horn into a medicinal pill could take some time, but it had already been over 10 days since Hu had bought the horned pomfret. After eating treasure fish a couple of times, Liang Qu figured that a treasure fish's horn alone wouldn't be enough to help someone break through the blood barrier. It likely served as a supplement or catalyst. Li Libo looked around, and after confirming that Instructor Lu wasn't nearby, whispered again, and have you noticed that Instructor Lu doesn't seem very approachable? He seems to barely tolerate us. Liang Qu nodded. Maybe he's just bothered by our fishy smell. Previously, whenever they practiced Ape Fist, Huai would correct them and even demonstrate. But Instructor Lu only pointed out mistakes if asked and rarely demonstrated. If they didn't already have a foundation in Ape Fist, Instructor Lu's indifference would have made learning a challenge. One thing was clear, whenever Instructor Lu got close, he'd noticeably wrinkle his nose, as if he couldn't stand the smell. It wasn't that Liang Qu enjoyed smelling like fish. He fished so often that even washing thoroughly couldn't fully get rid of it. Ah well, for a moment there, I thought all martial artists were as friendly as Brother Shang and Instructor Hu. Don't overthink it. It's already surprising that Brother Shang and Instructor Hu don't discriminate against us. All we need is to learn the skills. Maybe it was from reading too many novels, but Liang Qu had felt a bit uncomfortable with the friendly treatment he'd been receiving when he first joined. Now, he was back in his comfort zone. Oh, by the way, have you seen that young master over there? Who? Subscribe to Chinese novel audio wave. The one in white, with gold trim on his clothes. I heard he's the 3rd young master of the Zhao family, Zhao Shuiyuan. Who would have thought he'd come here to train? That confirms we made the right choice with the young martial arts school. The 3rd young master of the Zhao household. Following Li Libo's gaze, Liang Qu saw the so-called young master. He did indeed look clean and refined, even if his features were average. The difference between him and the commoners was obvious at a glance. So, his father was Master Zhao. A chill ran down Liang Qu's spine. Looking at Zhao Shuiyuan, he couldn't reconcile him with his father's reputation. He decided to keep his distance. Noticing their gaze, Zhao Shuiyuan glanced over, but he quickly looked away. He'd seen the two fishermen around, but they were beneath his notice. In 3 months, they'd go back to wherever they came from. Speaking of which, the end of the month is coming up, and Master Yang will be giving a lecture. Maybe then I'll have a breakthrough. Always good to have a dream. With Instructor Lu absent, Liang Qu and Li Libo idly chatted until they heard Shang Chengsong's voice from down the hall. Today's supervising instructor is Brother Lu. He'll be your teacher. Although Brother Lu isn't a direct disciple of Master Yang, he has extensive experience. Oh, and there are a couple of other disciples from Yixing City here, too. You might even know them. Li Libo looked up at the sound, immediately recognizing someone. Chen Jicheng, is that you? Chapter 23, 3 Fellow Townsmen. Chen Jicheng turned his head at the sound and scoffed when he saw Li Libo. Why couldn't it be me? If you can be here, why can't I? Hey, looking for trouble, are you? Li Libo rolled up his sleeves, ready to teach Chen Jicheng a lesson. Shang Chengsong stepped between them, smiling. You two seem to get along well. Who's getting along with him? Off to the side, Liang Qu scratched his head. He remembered Chen Jicheng as well. Yixing City had quite a population, over 1,000 people, half of whom came from fishing families, and only a few dozen around the same age. Li Libo was one, and Chen Jicheng was another. Since they ran into each other often, everyone knew one another. Li Libo was around 17 or 18, Liang Qu was about 15 or 16, and Chen Jicheng was older, nearly 19 or 20. While Li Libo had 2 older brothers and a tendency to idle about, Chen Jicheng only had a sister and was well known for his fishing skills. He earned more than 100 wen a day, almost like Liang Qu. Chen Jicheng had no secret tricks, he made every coin with his skill alone. Shang Chengsong said, it's not unusual for folks from Yixing City to show up here, but having 3 of you at once is rare. Since you all know each other, I'll leave the rest to Junior Brother Liang and Junior Brother Li. Liang Qu nodded. Got it. Hey, Jia, Shui. Chen Jicheng nodded back, showing a much friendlier attitude toward Liang Qu than Li Libo. Liang Qu, after all, was part of why he started learning martial arts. The day they both caught a treasure fish, Liang Qu's skills had completely overshadowed Chen Jicheng's. As young men, it had naturally left Chen feeling a bit competitive. But on the day they handed over the autumn tax, Chen Jicheng saw Liang Qu's actions firsthand, and his feelings changed from resentment to respect. To be honest, if it were him, he wouldn't have given up that stone of rice. And then he heard Liang Qu had gone off to study martial arts. Chen Jicheng, having sold his treasure fish for a fair amount, had plenty left even after the autumn tax and felt inspired to seek his own path. A moment later, Lu Xiaohui returned, and after hearing that another student from Yixing City had joined, his eyebrows furrowed again, though he quickly regained his calm. Chen Jicheng sensed something was off, and soon his suspicions were confirmed. If not for Liang Qu and Li Libo pointing out his mistakes, he wouldn't have realized his stance training was off. He'd prepared himself for the possibility of facing prejudice because of his fishing background, but he hadn't expected it to be this bad. If it weren't for Liang Qu and Li Libo's solid foundations under Hu Qi's guidance, they wouldn't have been able to substitute as instructors, and he wouldn't have learned much in a whole day. If Liang Qu hadn't mentioned Hu Qi as someone they could rely on, Chen Jicheng would have lost patience. Liang Qu reassured him, just bear with it a bit longer. Once I finish learning crane fist, I'll teach you. In the 3 fist techniques, some stance work was similar, with only about a third significantly different. With the basics already covered, learning would go quickly. Yesterday and this morning, Liang Qu had finished Tiger Fist and estimated he'd finish Crane Fist by tomorrow. Chen Jicheng took a deep breath, calming his irritation. I owe you one, Shui. It's nothing. We 3 townsmen here in this martial arts school have to look out for each other. Li Libo pouted. Why didn't you thank me? I helped you just now too, you know. You, ha, quote question mark quote. You're saying that kid went to learn martial arts. In the courtyard, Zheng Shang, dressed in a white brocade robe, circled a peach tree as fallen leaves scattered around, mirroring his unsettled mind. A young servant in coarse clothes beside him bowed. Yes, sir. I've been tailing him for days. That kid from the Liang family seems to have had a breakthrough or something. His fishing skills have improved remarkably. About half a month ago, he managed to catch a horned pomfret, a treasure fish, and sold it for 6 taels and 5 jian. Then, he went to study martial arts at the Young Martial Arts School, where martial artist Hu even praised his strong foundation. It's been over 10 days now. The Young Martial Arts School. That's where the third young master trains too, right? Yes. The servant paused, then continued, oh, and one more thing. A few days ago during the autumn tax, a fisherman named Chen Qingzhong owed 7 dough of rice and nearly got sent to Lanzhou to dig the canal. That kid paid 3 dough of rice and 6 jian of silver to cover for him. I found out it was because Chen Qingzhong had once given him a bun and a few jin of grain. Zheng Shang raised an eyebrow, then sneered. A bun and a few jin of grain in exchange for a stone of fine rice. Even I'd like to make such a deal. The servant, Ah Quan, stayed silent. Zheng Shang circled the peach tree again and suddenly cursed, that damned Lin. Sent me off for more than a month like I'm some lowly dog. There were 2 stewards in the Zhao household, Lin Guiyang, the head steward, and Zheng Shang, the second steward. Originally, Zheng Shang wasn't a steward at all, he'd been a servant raised within the household. But he was clever and adept at handling affairs, gradually working his way up. In any group, rivalries inevitably develop. Lin Guiyang would never sit idly by and let Zheng Shang rise to threaten his own status. The two clashed constantly, vying for influence. Zheng Shang had thought of leveraging Liang Qu to win favor with the master of the house, but before he could do so, Lin Guiyang tricked him, sending him to deliver gifts in Guangzhou for the second young master's birthday. By the time Zheng Shang returned over a month later, the birthday celebration had long passed, and his gifts had been delivered by a subordinate in haste. Though the second young master had praised him, Zheng Shang knew that the true power lay elsewhere, as the master and eldest son held the reins. Then, he remembered that a promising youth from Yixing City remained, only to hear that the boy had gone off to study martial arts, which infuriated him. Master Yang was renowned for his reputation and wouldn't let anything slide. If Zheng Shang attempted anything underhanded, it would certainly draw trouble. He was puzzled by how a kid who'd nearly starved to death, according to Bald Zhang, had changed so drastically. Could it be true what people say about sudden breakthroughs? Though skeptical, Zheng Shang couldn't dismiss the possibility entirely. For now, brute force was out of the question. The Zhao household's authority held sway over Pingyang town, but that authority rested with the Zhao family, Master Zhao, the eldest, second, and third young masters, not with him. He still had ambitions to rise higher. Oppressing a young man was easy, but stirring up trouble that would force the Zhao household to clean up after him would be disastrous. If word got back to the master, he could forget about ever surpassing Lin Guiyang and becoming the head steward. Carefulness was Zheng Zhang's mantra. By the way, where's Bald Zhang? Haven't seen him since last time, likely too ashamed to show his face. Good for nothing. Zheng Shang spat out another curse. After a moment's thought, he suddenly asked, Ah Quan, have any commoners in Pingyang town managed to achieve success through martial arts? Well, a few, I guess. Ah Quan chuckled awkwardly. I haven't heard about the other 2 schools, but Young Martial Arts School has been around for over a decade and has produced a few barrier-breaking fighters from commoner backgrounds, though definitely less than 30. And in these past 10 years, how many commoners have joined the Young Martial Arts School? Ah Quan quickly did the math. Around 5 or 6 a month, over 10 years, nearly 1,000. Nearly 1,000. HMPH, then let's be patient and wait a couple of months. Chapter 24, Lotus Roots, Danger. The qi circulating within his chest completed another cycle, gradually dispersing into his organs, bringing a subtle warmth and comfort. Phew, Ape Fist really suits me best, Liang Qu said, wiping the fine sweat from his forehead. Over the past days, he had already learned the entire technique. His inner qi felt like it had reached the thickness of a chopstick, showing rapid progress, and he had also gained a deeper understanding of the Tao in martial arts. Some things are only discovered through personal experience. After practicing the three-fist techniques for so long, Liang Qu began to grasp the role of one's physical foundation. In short, every martial technique has an ideal body type that fits it, a concept he called compatibility. Take his ape arms, wasp waist, and mantis legs, for example, they perfectly align with the ape fist in the three-fist techniques. Practicing felt as natural as having the answers during a test, and he scored full marks every time, making rapid progress. The other two styles, tiger fist and crane fist, didn't match him as well, they only felt about 80% and 60% compatible, respectively. Over time, this difference in compatibility would create a significant gap. For instance, Li Libo's ape fist could only score about 85 points. Chen Jichang, on the other hand, was suited to tiger fist, but even he could only manage around 90. However, the zhuang techniques within the martial arts could be adjusted. With a skilled instructor, one could make modifications to improve compatibility. As the saying goes, if the mountain doesn't come to me, I'll go to the mountain myself. Unfortunately, senior brother Hu Qi wasn't capable of that, and Lu Xiaohui would be even less likely to care, even if he knew. Only Master Yang could achieve that level, so at the end of every month, the disciples sought his guidance. A good teacher truly makes a difference. Of course, beyond the visible scores in body compatibility, there were hidden factors in martial arts aptitude. Only with everything added together could someone's full potential be judged. For instance, if someone lacked the ideal body proportions but possessed abundant qi and blood or extraordinary insight, they might even self-modify techniques or harness qi to enhance their body, qualities that can't always be seen just by checking one's bones. This is why Hu Qi said body proportions aren't everything. Sometimes, someone with poor physical compatibility can still outshine everyone. Liang Qu marveled at the diversity among people, feeling that only by working twice as hard could he achieve greatness. Unfortunately, after 3 days of training, he'd spent over 100 when he had previously earned. If he didn't start working soon, he'd have nothing left to eat. If not for overhearing senior brother Shang mention that Master Yang would come by in the afternoon or evening, he'd already have headed out for a boat trip after finishing his crane fist practice. Now, he could only wait for Master Yang and leave afterward. He glanced enviously at the dozens of other disciples. After joining the martial school, he realized that he and his few fellow poor brothers had only paid 7 taels each, while most others paid at least 10. They were able to train without taking breaks to earn money, progressing several times faster. I haven't seen Bald Zhang in a while. Yeah, he didn't even show up for the last tax collection. Think he ran away? Unlikely. He's always freeloading and bullying around. He wouldn't miss tax payments. Nearby, Li Libo and Chen Jichang were sitting by a flower bed, idly chatting. When Liang Qu caught a mention of Bald Zhang, he perked up his ears. Chen Jichang scowled. Who cares about him? Not seeing him is a good thing, he's no decent guy anyway. True, Li Libo agreed, scanning around. Hey, look, there are a few girls over there. The one leading them is pretty cool. Don't stare. Who knows, they might be from some influential family. Just looking. Seeing the conversation veer off topic, Liang Qu relaxed and continued practicing his ape fist. But just as he was halfway through, his mental link suddenly began pulsing with urgent signals. Fat catfish and can't move were frantically sending him messages. The treasure lotus root in the water was under attack. And by a big one. Liang Qu's face changed. The treasure lotus root was the start of his fortune. Although only about 20 of them produced the essence of the waters, the entire lotus patch spanned dozens of meters, with hundreds more roots that didn't contain the essence but still had notable healing properties. He treasured them and usually had Can't Move guard them diligently, with fat catfish stationed nearby to assist. Small fish and shrimp that tried to intrude were typically dispatched and eaten by the two beasts. But now, what kind of creature could make both a crocodile and a 6-whiskered catfish back off and continuously send him distress signals? With this thought, Liang Qu couldn't sit still any longer. He hastily said goodbye to Li Libo and Chen Jichang, gathered his things, and prepared to leave. Surprised, they asked, "Why are you leaving now? Master Yang might arrive soon. Aren't you going to stay and get his guidance?" Liang Qu hesitated a moment. I have something urgent to handle. If I'm quick, I might make it back in time. It was still morning. If he hurried back, he could possibly return. Seeing Liang Qu's clear urgency, they didn't press him further and instead advised him to stay safe on the road. Watching him go, Li Libo scratched his head. Strange, he did the same thing last time. Last time? Yeah, Li Libo nodded. Last time Shui was training with martial artist who and left halfway through without any notice. Why think so much? Maybe Shui had already made arrangements. True. As fallen leaves layered the muddy ground, they decayed into a dark brown mulch. Leaving the martial arts school, Liang Qu jogged at a steady pace. He covered the 10 miles from Pingyang town to Yixing City in under half an hour. When he reached the pier, he took a moment to catch his breath, then casually untied a boat, waiting until he was out of sight to row swiftly to the lotus root area. He knocked on the water's surface. After a moment, a pig-woman dragon and a 6-whiskered catfish surfaced. Liang Qu patted their heads, watched them do a roll, and confirmed they hadn't been injured before he relaxed. He had previously instructed both creatures to assess intruders to see if they could handle them, and if not, to retreat rather than fight. After all, as the saying goes, lose ground but keep people, and both survive, lose people but keep ground, and both are lost. While the lotus root was precious, it couldn't compare to the 2 water beasts he had trained. Both creatures had grown significantly stronger after eating treasure fish, with can't move now over 2 meters long, and fat catfish even reaching 2.4 meters. Their growth was obvious, even the amount of essence of the waters they needed for their next evolution had decreased by more than 4 points each. Their size was certainly an advantage, the more powerful his minions, the better. But it puzzled Liang Qu, what sort of creature could be so formidable that both can't move and fat catfish had to retreat. Just as he pondered this, fat catfish suddenly leaned its head onto the boat, opened its mouth, and spat out 5 pieces of lotus root onto the wooden planks with a dull thud. Liang Qu picked up a piece and examined it in surprise. This lotus root has the essence of the waters. Did you take it before the monster arrived? Fat catfish and pig-woman dragon flicked their tails, splashing water onto Liang Qu, who didn't get angry. In fact, he was touched. He had set aside a few essence of the water's lotus roots for emergencies and instructed his beasts to guard them closely. To his delight, they had not only listened but also knew to protect his valuable assets. They're finally showing promise. All that training wasn't wasted. He reached for a wooden spear, his cheek muscles tightening into sharp lines as he narrowed his eyes. All right, let's dive in and see who dares to steal my lotus roots. Chapter 25, The Spirit Beast. Liang Qu was set on reclaiming his territory. After consuming the treasure fish, his Z-spirit fusion rate had risen to a solid 11.7. The strength of water flow he could control now neared 70 Jin, and he could stay submerged for even longer. The most crucial change was his expanded perception. While the precise sensory range remained unchanged, his general sense had grown by another meter, now covering a 6-meter sphere, a significant span. He'd also been training for over half a month, transforming from the frail young fisherman he once was. With the support of the pig-woman dragon and the fat catfish, he was nearly unstoppable in the shallows. He was confident that the creature encroaching on his territory wasn't too powerful. Otherwise, it wouldn't have idly watched the fat catfish snatch up the most precious lotus roots. The river was windy today. Liang Qu secured his small boat with a stone tied to a rope to prevent it from drifting. Armed with a wooden spear and a pig bladder for buoyancy, he dived into the water, following his 2 companions back to the lotus root-laden riverbed. It was quiet underwater. Sunlight filtered through the water, breaking into fine rays that illuminated his surroundings. The silt was strewn with rocks, and strange plants grew between them, their thin strands waving gently with the current. Can't Move was crouched low on the riverbed, inching forward cautiously, seemingly wary of the formidable creature up ahead, even allowing bits of water grass to dangle from its head without brushing them away. The fat catfish lay flat beside it, swaying its tail slowly to minimize any disturbance in the water. Many alert fish could sense changes in water flow, any sudden movement could easily betray them. Liang Qu matched their pace, carefully advancing over the undulating mud. Rounding a large boulder, he finally caught sight of a patch of exposed lotus roots spreading across the ground. His two companions sent a mental signal through their shared link. They were getting close. Liang Qu crouched low again, moving across another uneven mudflat. Suddenly, an irregular silhouette entered his field of vision. Completely still, it looked like a raised black rock, about a meter tall. What is that? A rock? Is that the creature? Liang Qu was certain the rock hadn't been there before. He glanced at Can't Move and the fat catfish, who both confirmed his suspicion. Strange. He couldn't tell what kind of creature it was. It didn't look like any fish, lacking the usual elongated form, nor did it seem like a typical water creature. Could it be some kind of crustacean? The thought struck him. Only a crustacean would have such an odd shape, crouching like a massive rock. Bubbles started to drift up from a section of the rock, indicating it was indeed a crustacean of some kind. What kind of crustacean could grow so large? Was it a spirit beast? Liang Qu shuddered. Ever since arriving in this world, he knew that demons and spirit beasts were real. He had expected his companions might have to deal with a 4 to 5 meter long crocodile or some other sizable beast, but he hadn't imagined a spirit creature would be involved. Yet, looking at the lotus patch that had been half devoured, he frowned deeply. After all, the treasure plant he had finally found couldn't just be surrendered to a spirit beast. Everything was progressing so well, and now, a spirit creature had appeared to seize his most precious resource. Gripping his spear tightly, Liang Qu's thoughts began to race. How much essence of the waters could a spirit beast yield if he managed to take it down? 10 units. Dozens, maybe. The idea flashed across his mind, startling him. This was a spirit beast, not some ordinary water creature. But perhaps it wasn't impossible. His thoughts bounced around, considering possibilities. Crustaceans had several weak spots, such as the underside, where a well-placed spear could finish them off. And then there were its eyes. Without those, a sight-dependent creature would be rendered helpless. It likely wasn't that powerful, or it wouldn't have let the fat catfish make off with the best lotus roots. The more Liang Qu thought about it, the more unsettled he felt, his hand repeatedly tightening and loosening around the spear. He remembered something his college mentor used to say. To change your life, you must take risks. The most meaningful things happen by chance, unimportant things are carefully planned. Risk, a word that had driven human progress throughout history. Dangerous but alluring. He wasn't willing to give up. He was going to reclaim what was his. Liang Qu clenched his fist, the water compressing between his fingers, spraying out in white foam. Once he set his sights on something, he never gave it up without a fight. Zhang Tianyu had stolen his boat, and Zhang Tianyu had paid the price. Now, with a fair chance of victory, Liang Qu would gamble. He'd wager on who was stronger, him or the spirit beast. At the Yang Martial Arts School, Li Libo and Chen Jicheng were sparring, practicing the moves from the three-fist techniques. Unlike Liang Qu, who had mastered all three forms, Li Libo had learned only the ape fist and tiger fist, while Chen Jicheng had focused solely on the tiger fist. The two had no intention of learning the remaining techniques. Instead, they wanted to concentrate on cultivating their inner vitality. Part of this was due to Lu Xiaohui's lack of interest in their training, and part was the pressure they felt from Liang Qu's rapid progress. In any case, the remaining techniques would only serve to broaden their horizons, while their primary practice focused on the techniques that best suited them. The two ultimately chose to dedicate more time to improving themselves, hoping to achieve a breakthrough within 3 months and remain at the martial arts school. If they could break through, it would almost be a significant accomplishment. In Pingyang town, a single barrier fighter was nothing remarkable, even tax exemptions wouldn't apply. But in Yixing City, it was enough to drastically improve their quality of life. For instance, who would be called on when disputes arose over irrigation issues between farmers? Naturally, the farmers in Yixing City would think of the village's barrier-breaking fighter. But help doesn't come free. Surely, they'd need to bring a few dough of rice, right? Over time, respect would build, and the local chief might reconsider holding on to his position without shame. In small towns, success didn't require much complexity. Today, the two were just fish sellers, who knew what the future held. Driven by these dreams, the two trained tirelessly, squeezing every second. "Hey, you two over there, you smell awful, could you move further away?" Li Libo and Chen Jicheng froze mid-movement, then resumed their practice, though it was visibly more hesitant. "Did you not hear me?" "Yes, you two, the fishmongers. Maybe they're deaf, too. Ha ha ha." Across the training ground, 3 young men sat squatting, pointing and jeering. No one else intervened. "Your words are harsh, Lu Tingkai," another man stepped forward, his voice carrying. Relieved, Li Libo and Chen Jicheng shared a glance and exhaled. "Oh." Lu Tingkai adjusted his pants and spread his legs as he lounged on a bench, tilting his head. "Well, Shui Dingyi, can you not smell it? Subscribe to Chinese Novel Audio Wave." True enough. The young man, who initially seemed to be stepping in, suddenly laughed. "Yeah, maybe they should clear out." Li Libo and Chen Jicheng froze, their jaw muscles clenching as shame and anger surged. They'd always chosen a corner of the training ground, careful to avoid attention, yet here they were, humiliated with no provocation. They'd done nothing to deserve this. "How about this?" Lu Tingkai suddenly stood up, moving toward them. Li Libo and Chen Jicheng realized only then just how tall he was, nearly 6.5 feet, forcing them to look up. Towering over them, Lu Tingkai grinned, showing his sharp, white teeth. "To tolerate your presence here, how about 2 liang of silver each?" Nearby, Lu Xiaohui lifted his stone weights, ignoring the scene entirely. Chapter 26, Melee. "Why you?" Li Libo's eyes turned red as he involuntarily stepped forward with his right foot. Chen Jicheng quickly grabbed his fellow townsman. "Hold it. Senior brother Shang and the others aren't here." Li Libo suddenly remembered that Shang Chengsong had left at noon, leaving the martial arts school without a single personal disciple of Master Yang present. "Senior brother Shang. Your trump card is senior brother Shang, isn't it? Do you really think he'll help you?" Lu Tingkai's heart skipped a beat. He was indeed afraid the two in front of him might file a complaint, but he wasn't new to this and had a script ready to sway them. "Senior brother Shang might speak a few kind words to you, and you actually think you're someone important now. Do you really think senior brother Shang will punish the 4 of us for the sake of 3 muddy fishermen? Unless he's willing to kick us all out, for you 3. Li Libo and Chen Jicheng felt a sinking sensation in their hearts as they were reminded of their identities. Fisherman. Would senior brother Shang really help a few fishermen? Even if he wanted to, would he outright kick out Lu Tingkai and his group? And if he didn't? The two had just paid their autumn taxes and were familiar with the ways of powerful figures. Half convinced by Lu Tingkai's words, their expressions grew grim. Seeing their reactions, Lu Tingkai felt at ease and pressed further, seizing the moment. "You two stink of fish so badly that no one can focus on their training. Isn't it fair to chip in some money so everyone can have some yogurt to drink?" "Oh, right. There's 3 of you, isn't there? Where's the other one? Did he leave early, knowing he couldn't handle this? Too bad, you'll have to cover his share too." Chen Jicheng faltered, but he still angrily retorted, "We always keep at least 10 steps away from you. Even if there's a fishy smell, you can't possibly notice it." "Sorry, didn't you know training improves your senses? We're just more sensitive to smells. What are you going to do about it? And if we don't pay?" "Don't pay." Lu Tingkai raised an eyebrow, slouching lazily before turning around and clasping his hands in salute. "Senior Lu, would it be all right if I sparred with these 2 junior brothers?" Li Libo and Chen Jicheng were shocked. Lu Tingkai was nearly at the skin barrier stage and a veteran practitioner. How could he possibly justify picking on them? And senior Lu Xiaohui, who already didn't like them, would surely welcome the excuse. What's more, the martial arts school allowed sparring, getting injured was commonplace. Unexpectedly, Lu Xiaohui frowned when he heard this. He disliked the fishermen from Yixing City and their smell but wasn't about to stoop to targeting them. A 2-barrier fighter squaring off against 3 fishermen. He didn't care enough to bother. Lu Tingkai had chosen the wrong person to manipulate. Lu Xiaohui set down the stone lock he had been holding, left the training ground without a word, and disappeared, leaving an awkward silence behind. Watching Lu Xiaohui's retreating figure, Lu Tingkei's lips twitched. However, his thick-skinned nature quickly prevailed. He wasn't worried, everything was still under his control. If Lu Xiaohui wouldn't intervene, it was actually better. With that, he turned back, rolled up his sleeves, and prepared to spar with the two. If you two junior brothers won't behave, I'll just have to act on behalf of our teachers. Chen Jicheng braced himself, but out of the corner of his eye, he suddenly saw Li Libo rush forward, pick something up from the flower bed, and swing it hard at Lu Tingkei's head. Thud. A dull sound echoed through the training ground. Everyone froze. Lu Tingkei swayed on his feet, his vision blurring. Turning unsteadily, he glanced at the stone in Li Libo's hand and touched the back of his own head. Pulling his hand in front of his face, he saw it covered in bright red blood. He wanted to curse but couldn't think straight. Stumbling, he leaned against the wall. Shui Dingyi and the others were stunned before they snapped out of it and shouted, "Get him!" No. In the corner, Lu Tingkei was even more panicked. A one-on-one match could still be considered sparring, but a group brawl was a whole other matter. This could get him expelled. He opened his mouth to stop Shui Dingyi, but his throbbing head prevented him from uttering a word. He never expected Li Libo to be so reckless, starting with a brutal smash to the head. The situation spiraled into chaos. Watch out! Chen Jicheng yanked Li Libo aside just as someone grabbed a wooden staff from the weapons rack and brought it down hard where Li Libo had been standing. Underwater. Liang Qu took a deep breath from the pig bladder tied around his waist, now filled with air. The rock remained still. From a shifted perspective, Liang Qu observed the creature more closely, noting especially the two protrusions at the top. It was clearly the eye stalks. A glaring weak spot, he thought. Moving carefully behind the cover of scattered rocks, he advanced toward it. But just as he was preparing to make his move, the shelled creature stirred. Liang Qu froze immediately, minimizing his presence. Most crustaceans had highly sensitive touch and could detect vibrations in the ground through their limbs. Moving now would only expose him. The seemingly inert rock suddenly split into two smaller ones, which then unfolded to reveal a pair of pincers supporting the main shell, gradually lifting the entire rock upward. Only then did Liang Qu realize a significant portion had been buried in the silt below. When fully extended, the creature revealed an hourglass shape, narrower at the bottom and broader at the top, standing about 1.7 meters tall. From his hidden vantage, Liang Qu found it oddly familiar. Why does this remind me of an indomitable battle tank? The creature resembled a crab whose midsection had been unnaturally stretched. The upper body was a triangular mass with large pincers, while the lower body featured crab-like legs encircled by what looked like a hairy belt. Its size exceeded his expectations. It wasn't just a meter tall as he'd assumed but nearly matched his own height. With a width over a meter, it appeared intimidatingly robust. As the crab monster stood still, Liang Qu did the same. Two smaller beasts lay perfectly camouflaged in the silt, blending seamlessly with their surroundings. For a moment, nothing changed, but everything had. Liang Qu fixated on the crab monster, but then his vision cleared abruptly. The murky water seemed to part, revealing the deep, shadowy expanse beyond. Exclamation mark! Run! Liang Qu mentally shouted, pushing off with his feet to retreat. The pig woman dragon and fat catfish rolled away in a frenzy. In the next moment, an enormous presence appeared within his perception, plummeting rapidly overhead. The crab monster's heavy legs pierced the silt, stirring up currents that whipped up debris to Liang Qu's waist. Its massive pincers cut through the water with a tearing sound, splintered bubbles trailing like fine silk as it aimed a strike at Liang Qu's head. The fearsome whistle of its movement sent chills down his spine. Liang Qu dodged to the side, simultaneously using water manipulation to create opposing forces, one to push the crab claw away, the other to propel himself aside. The two forces narrowly avoided collision. The claw smashed into a cluster of stones, toppling half-human-sized rocks and scattering water with a deafening crash. Debris swirled wildly, reaching over a meter high. What a ferocious strike! Liang Qu's pupils contracted. As he dodged, the massive claw sliced through the murk, swinging horizontally toward him. Water surged violently like a writhing serpent. Liang Qu raised a barrier, using water flow from behind to cushion the blow, but he was still flung backward, gradually descending. The crab monster extracted its segmented limbs from the silt, coiled its lower body like a shrimp, and launched itself explosively through the mud cloud. The pig woman dragon and fat catfish tried to intercept but were too slow. The joints of the crab monster's legs were encrusted with mud, shedding it rapidly under the pressure of the water. The flying debris seemed to transform into countless tiny gray hands attempting to grab it, but to no avail. But in the next instant, an invisible force gathered the scattered particles, forming a cloud that enveloped the crab monster's eye stalks, blinding it. Chapter 27, Fighting. The crab monster charged once more, but at the critical moment, Liang Qu manipulated the water, mixing it with silt to obscure the monster's vision. He rotated the water into a vortex with a strangling force. His 5 fingers clenched tightly, yet the feedback in his perception circle didn't indicate the monster's eyes had been crushed. Suddenly, the crab monster's pincers flailed wildly, scattering debris as it thrashed about. The water turned murky as silt and stones flew everywhere. Although its eyes weren't destroyed, the intense pain caused the creature to lose composure. Liang Qu leapt out of its attack range, catching sight of a fat catfish swimming toward the monster from behind. Perfect timing. As the crab monster thrashed in pain, the fat catfish moved in, opening its massive jaws to swallow a mix of water and silt, then biting viciously at one of the monster's compound eyes. With a fierce tug, the catfish tore off the eye stalk, dragging with it pink flesh and nerves. Blood gushed from the hollow socket, the intense pain driving the crab monster into a frenzy. Its protruding eyes were its most significant weakness. However, the monster's eyes were spaced far apart, making it impossible for the catfish to swallow both at once, even with its large mouth. The fat catfish retreated swiftly after its successful strike, narrowly avoiding a deadly pincer clamp before exerting all its strength to flee. The crab monster, maddened with rage, exuded a terrifying aura of oppression that would freeze any ordinary person in their tracks. Ignoring Liang Qu entirely, it surged after the retreating catfish, sending stones flying and the waterbed trembling as it charged. Chaos erupted. No one could have predicted just how fearsome the crab monster would become. Liang Qu's heart pounded furiously. But seeing Ah Fei, the fat catfish, fleeing, he didn't hesitate. Channeling the water flow entirely into his spear, his muscles rippled like waves, tightening like steel cords before releasing with explosive force. He lunged forward, resembling an ape leaping from ancient treetops, and thrust his spear at the crab monster's leg joint. The sharp, hardened flint tip easily pierced the joint membrane. With a twist and a pull, Liang Qu severed the entire crab leg. The charging crab monster stumbled, suddenly losing control of one leg embedded in the silt. The momentum snapped it off easily. With only 6 limbs remaining, its balance was severely compromised, drastically reducing its speed as it pursued the catfish. Air bubbles burst from the crab monster's mouth as its nerves were assaulted by excruciating stimuli. It abandoned the catfish and turned its focus back on Liang Qu. The massive pincers came down like a guillotine. A direct hit would undoubtedly cut him in half. Panic surged through Liang Qu. His left leg tensed as he attempted to push off from a nearby rock to evade, but his foot slipped into the silt. Though the mud provided some resistance, it was nothing compared to solid ground. As his foot sank, Liang Qu's heart nearly stopped. Adrenaline flooded his system, and cold sweat poured down his back. He instinctively used his spear to block the attack and redirected the water flow to push himself sideways. The pincer came from a steep angle this time, making it harder to deflect. Crack! The spear snapped in half. Though the water's force shifted Liang Qu slightly, the pincer still grazed his waist, leaving a fiery pain as though a layer of skin had been flayed. Mud and burst pig bladders floated upwards in a haze. Liang Qu choked on water but didn't dare pause. Holding his breath, he rolled to the side, grabbing onto a rock and desperately fleeing. Meanwhile, the fat catfish pivoted sharply. The tables had turned, now Liang Qu was the one frantically escaping. He leapt over rocks and propelled himself through the water. The crab monster pursued, but as it reached a certain spot, the silt beneath its feet suddenly erupted. The pig-woman dragon, lying in ambush, snapped its massive jaws around one of the crab monster's limbs. With immense force, the dragon bit through the joint membrane, spinning and ripping until it tore the leg clean off. With 2 legs gone from one side, the crab monster's balance was in shambles. Enraged, it swung its invincible pincer downward, aiming to crush the dragon into pulp. Just then, its world went black, and a searing pain shot through its head. Its other eye was gone. The fat catfish had returned, repeating its earlier attack, devouring the remaining eye before retreating into the depths. With the blinded crab monster incapacitated, the catfish and dragon both withdrew to safety, leaving the monster bubbling furiously. Liang Qu observed the scene, surmising the creature's agony from the bubbles it emitted. With the crab monster incapacitated, Liang Qu, the fat catfish, and the pig-woman dragon regrouped at a safe distance. Elsewhere, chaos engulfed the young martial arts school. Accompanied by 2 others, Lu Tingkai grabbed a wooden stick and charged at Li Libo and Chen Jicheng. Chen Jicheng pulled Li Libo aside to avoid a strike, but the others' attacks found their mark. Wooden sticks rained down, threatening to shatter bones. You bast**. Chen Jicheng, older and usually more composed than Li Libo, endured the humiliation. But under the relentless assault and his own boiling anger, he snapped. Though only in his late teens, fury overwhelmed him. Ignoring the pain, Chen Jicheng seized one of the descending sticks, bracing himself as he rammed forward with all his might. Taken by surprise, Shui Dingyi was tackled to the ground, and the 2 began wrestling. The remaining 2 attackers tried to intervene, but Li Libo tackled one, while the other was tripped in the chaos, dragged into the scuffle. None of the 5 combatants were barrier breakers, they were barely considered martial arts trainees. Fueled by rage, they fought like common street brawlers, relying solely on brute force and pain tolerance. Shui Dingyi elbowed Chen Jicheng, splitting his brow, but Chen's fingers clamped around Shui's throat, leaving raw, bloody scratches. Even as another attacker punched him repeatedly, Chen Jicheng's focus didn't waver. The best street fighting tactic: pick one target and beat them senseless, ensuring they're bedridden for at least a month. Chen Jicheng locked onto Lu Tingkai and Shui Dingyi, ignoring all other attacks. No matter what, his sole goal was to crush Shui Dingyi. Chapter 28, Kill the Crab Monster. The midday sun blazed even brighter, but its light failed to pierce through the swirling haze of silt and water. Broken stone pillars jutted haphazardly from the muddy riverbed, while water plants uprooted from their crevices floated away with the gentle currents. The once clear river bottom had become a chaotic mess after Liang Qu and his companions' fierce battle, resembling the aftermath of an undersea earthquake. Liang Qu burst to the water's surface, gasping for air. Tilting his head back, he felt his tongue cracking with dryness as his chest heaved violently. Beads of water dripped from his soaked hair, mingling with cold sweat as they trickled down his chin and splashed into the river below. The waves buoyed him gently, their shimmering light dancing in every direction. Taking deep, greedy breaths like a bellows, Liang Qu's lungs drew in massive amounts of oxygen, while his heart pumped frantically to circulate it through his body. His flushed face quickly paled as sensation returned to his numbed mind. The crab monster's relentless assault had been suffocating, burning through more oxygen in a few minutes than he would normally consume in over 10. Lowering his gaze, he inspected his waist. A wound nearly the width of his hand stretched from 3 to 4 inches to the side of his navel all the way to his lower back. A swath of skin had been torn away, leaving the edges oozing pale yellow fluid while the center revealed exposed red muscle. Blood flowed steadily from the injury, sending shivers of cold sweat through him as a sense of dread gripped his heart. Splash! The fat catfish surfaced, dragging the clothes Liang Qu had left aboard the boat. Gritting his teeth, Liang Qu grabbed them and ripped them into strips to bandage the wound. With the injury shielded from the water, the searing pain lessened, and his frantically pounding heart began to settle. A wave surged against his chest as he examined the broken remains of his spear. The snapped wooden shaft bristled with splinters. "If only I had an iron trident," he muttered bitterly. "I wouldn't have gotten hurt." Reaching out, he broke off the protruding splinters, tidied the jagged edges, and adjusted his grip on the shortened spear. Taking a deep breath, Liang Qu dove back underwater. The crab monster was gravely injured but not dead yet. He couldn't allow it to recover. Round 2, begin. The underwater scene had somewhat settled, with the swirling sediment now hovering only about 2 meters above the riverbed. Yet the crab monster was nowhere in sight. Thanks to the keen senses of the fat catfish and the pig woman dragon, it didn't take long to locate the creature. Liang Qu's eyes turned bloodshot when he saw it. The crab monster was sprawled across a lotus patch, its claws clutching large chunks of lotus root as it gnawed furiously, devouring entire sections in a single bite. The lotus root was restoring its vitality. Its broken limbs were already sprouting new buds of flesh, and fresh appendages were growing even from its eyeless sockets. Crabs had an astonishing ability to regenerate. Liang Qu knew he couldn't let it eat any more, otherwise, all their efforts would have been wasted. Besides, that lotus root was his. Liang Qu charged forward. The moment he touched the ground, one of the crab monster's newly grown antennae twitched, swiveling toward him. Its vision hadn't returned yet. Unable to see Liang Qu, it relied on vibrations sensed through its limbs to determine his position. Crabs typically couldn't regrow their eyes once both eyeballs and stalks were destroyed. In place of eyes, their sockets might grow a mere antenna, but this was only true for ordinary crabs. Liang Qu couldn't be certain the crab monster would follow the same rule, so he had to kill it before it regrew its sight. He'd already realized earlier that the crab monster had a critical weakness: it wasn't very smart. Subscribe to Chinese Novel Audio Wave. Quickly formulating a plan, Liang Qu struck a rock with his shortened spear. The vibrations instantly provoked the creature, sending it into a rage. Trembling with fury, it surged forward, its massive legs shaking as it charged straight at him. Liang Qu steadied himself. The crab monster hurtled toward him like an armored war machine, whipping up water currents that crashed into his face. It felt as though he were standing at the edge of an erupting volcano. Timing his movement precisely, Liang Qu leapt away, using water manipulation to create a disturbance on the opposite side. The creature lunged, its claws snapping decisively at the water's disturbance, but they grasped nothing but empty currents. The motion left its front unguarded, exposing its pale, vulnerable underbelly. Now, landing back on the ground, Liang Qu tightened his grip on the shortened spear. His gaze locked onto the pale spot at its navel. Channeling all his strength, he activated every muscle in his body, wrists, elbows, waist, and legs, contracting and releasing them in one explosive motion. The ground beneath him trembled as he launched himself forward. Years of stance training had forged an unshakable foundation, allowing him to strike with precision and force. The damaged tip of the spear disappeared from Liang Qu's view as it pierced forward. Blood seeped from his bandaged waist, forming crimson threads in the water that unraveled in his wake. As Liang Qu landed, the crab monster twisted its massive claw toward him, but it was already too late. The 1-meter-long spear plunged into its navel at an angle, sinking deep into its softest, most vital spot. "It's a female," Liang Qu noted, spotting the rounded abdomen beneath its shell. For crustaceans, the nerve centers were spread across 3 segments, with the navel area being the most fragile. It housed their reproductive glands, a central nerve cluster, and some of their softest tissue. Killing a crab required nothing more than a precise jab at this point, much like pushing a chopstick into a cooked crab's navel, instant death, without pain. Boom! The creature's giant claw, raised high above, crashed down into the mud on either side of Liang Qu. The impact stirred up a dense cloud of sediment, rising like stone walls around them. The pig woman dragon and fat catfish watched in wide-eyed awe. They couldn't understand how Liang Qu had taken down such a massive spirit beast when just moments ago, he'd been fleeing in desperation. Their reverence deepened. Truly, this was the god who had awakened their intelligence. Liang Qu, his body trembling with weakness, slowly stood. Before the dust could engulf him, he swam back to the surface and collapsed onto his small boat, gasping for air. That final blow had drained him completely. His vision spun, his entire body numb with exhaustion, as though hollowed out. Blood oozed steadily from his waist wound. Fighting off drowsiness, Liang Qu forced himself to stay awake, terrified that he might bleed out and never wake again. He lay there for a long time, his head finally clearing and a small surge of energy returning to his body. Gripping the boat's edge, he hauled himself upright, leaning against the divider and breathing heavily. The wind stirred the waves, rippling against the boat and sparkling under the sunlight. A low-flying hawk dove to snatch a fish that had leapt from the water. The cold breeze carried away the dampness from his skin, and his wet hair swayed lightly in the wind. Ha, ha ha ha, ha 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 ha. Liang Qu suddenly laughed, his voice echoing across the Zhonghuai wetlands. In this moment, he felt invincible. He had slain a massive spirit beast. A spirit beast, one that made fishermen flee in terror, had been defeated by none other than Liang Qu. The likes of Bald Zhong or the Wang brothers now seemed as trivial as children's games. His chest swelled with newfound confidence, as though no obstacle could block his path forward. Chapter 29, Counting the Harvest. Liang Qu burst out laughing but soon became short of breath, his wound seeping blood and causing sharper pain. Taking a moment to steady himself, he sat upright and untied the cloth bandage around his waist. Hiss! He grimaced as the coarse burlap, soaked with blood, hardened under the chilly breeze and adhered firmly to his scabbed wounds. Tearing it off was akin to ripping open the healing skin forcibly. However, leaving it untouched wasn't an option. The rough cloth wasn't just stained with blood but also embedded with dirt and sand picked up during the fight. He hadn't cleaned the wound properly earlier, prioritizing wrapping it quickly to prevent debris from embedding deeper. It was also why he didn't immediately consume the lotus root. Eating it then would cause the wounds to heal with the gravel still inside. Tossing the blood-soaked cloth into the water after pulling it off, Liang Qu cleaned the wound thoroughly before biting into 2 pieces of lotus root. As he watched the injury slowly knit itself together, he couldn't help lamenting his poverty. If only he could afford fine silk or satin cloth for bandages, he wouldn't have had to deal with burlap that stuck to his flesh. Fortunately, the damage was limited to the muscles and skin, it wasn't severe. The lotus root worked quickly, and in just over a quarter hour, the exposed red muscles had vanished, replaced by new skin. The bleeding stopped, leaving a thick scab behind, along with a mild soreness and an intense itch. Suppressing the urge to scratch off the scab, Liang Qu distracted himself by lightly scratching the surrounding skin instead. The itchiness, after all, was a sign of rapid cell regeneration. Compared to the sharp sting of pain, the tickling sensation felt far more tolerable, almost pleasurable, like the sudden relief of stomach pain. With most of the wound healed, Liang Qu couldn't wait any longer and waded back into the water. The thought of his spoils from the fight excited him. Just how much essence of the waters could a spirit beast yield? In his past life, Liang Qu had lived over 20 years without ever tasting, let alone seeing, a king crab. Now, he had the chance to devour a super-sized giant crab, one larger than a person. His mouth watered at the thought. Diving to the lakebed, Liang Qu saw his 2 beasts guarding the giant crab's corpse like watchdogs, one crouched on nearby rocks, the other buried in the silt. Spotting Liang Qu, both beasts shook off the dust and displayed their excitement. Based on past experiences, they expected to receive a share of whatever scraps their master didn't want. This crab was enormous, surely, there would be plenty to go around. But they were wrong. Liang Qu decided to share the succulent crab meat with them, not out of sudden generosity, but simply because the crab was far too massive to finish before it spoiled. Together, Liang Qu and the 2 beasts began dismembering the giant crab. Liang Qu retrieved the broken spear embedded in the crab's body, removing the flint tip to slice through the membrane at the base of its massive claw. Meanwhile, Can't Move gripped a crab leg in its jaws and performed a death spin, twisting off each limb. The fat catfish, less equipped for dismembering, brought back 2 previously severed legs and cheered on its companions, eager for its turn to feast. After removing the claws, Liang Qu turned his attention to the crab's carapace. Slicing through the membrane attaching it to the body, he wedged his hands under the giant shell and heaved with all his might. It was harder than hauling concrete on a construction site, and he gritted his teeth, his face reddening as bubbles escaped his lips. Crack, crack, bit by bit, the flesh and membrane tore away from the shell. With one final heave, the carapace came off entirely, revealing a treasure trove of bright orange crab roe the size of a human arm and head. Liang Qu's eyes gleamed, and the two beasts drooled uncontrollably. Even Can't Move forgot its usual vigilance, mesmerized by the sight. It only remembered its role when Liang Qu began collecting the roe. With a sharp bark through their mental link, it finally reported something. "Oh, what's up, Can't Move?" Liang Qu paused, intrigued by the notification. The pig-woman dragon reared up on its hind legs, pointing its stubby claws at the crab's underbelly. Following its direction, Liang Qu lifted the abdominal flap and found a cluster of translucent, fist-sized orbs tucked underneath, at least a dozen of them. "Are these crab eggs?" Liang Qu exclaimed, quickly plucking one out for closer inspection. The egg was as large as an adult's fist, translucent orange, and reminiscent of a dragon ball. Inside, he could clearly see a fully formed miniature crab spirit, identical in shape to the giant crab, standing upright, with 6 legs and a shell as white as milk. Unlike fish, which fertilize their eggs externally, crabs fertilized internally before laying their eggs. These were no mere eggs, they were fertilized embryos. Normal crabs laid thousands of eggs at a time, but this spirit beast had only 13. Liang Qu guessed it was a result of its transformation. Stronger creatures often shifted from an R strategy, producing large quantities of offspring with low survival rates, to a K strategy, where fewer, more robust offspring were nurtured. Otherwise, if millions of spirit crabs were born, they'd have overtaken the Zhonghuai wetlands long ago, leaving no room for humans to survive. Liang Qu's mind raced. Could I control these crab embryos? He entertained a bold idea. Controlling the adult spirit crab was out of the question, the mental backlash would overwhelm him. But unhatched embryos might be a different story. His mental link capacity was around 2 to 3 times that of Can't Move, with a bit of extra room left after linking with the two beasts. Surely, it was enough to handle an embryo. "No rush," he muttered. "First, I'm eating the crab meat." Having rushed to the wetlands after leaving the martial arts school that morning, Liang Qu hadn't eaten anything all day. Starving, he carried some crab roe and a claw back to his boat. There, he set up a stove, boiled water, and prepared the crab roe and meat. Once cooked, he formed them into 2 meatballs and devoured them. The roe was rich and creamy, while the meat was tender and sweet. Essence of the waters plus 0.9. Essence of the waters plus 0.5. The notification confirmed his suspicions. The roe was far more valuable than the meat, comparable to half a treasure fish. Red-eyed with excitement, Liang Qu tossed more roe into the boiling water, leaving the leftover meat for his 2 beasts. Essence of the waters plus 1. Essence of the waters plus 1.1. Essence of the waters plus 1.2. Fusion rate. It's all mine. Liang Qu wolfed down the roe, his eyes fixed on the glowing cauldron of the waters, an overwhelming sense of satisfaction flooding his heart. He was going to become invincible. Chapter 30, Huge amount of water essence. I'll just keep eating. Liang Qu grabbed his chopsticks and madly scooped out the crab roe. While waiting for it to cook, he didn't forget to dig out meat from the crab legs and toss it to the 2 beasts. The 2 beasts had no hands, and the crab monster's shell was incredibly hard. For Can't Move, it was barely possible to bite through the shell, but for the fat catfish, it was a losing battle. Eating was a struggle and relied entirely on their master, Liang Qu. He ate and dug simultaneously, not wasting a second. 15 minutes later, burp, Liang Qu let out a loud belch. He was completely stuffed and couldn't eat another bite. Eating nothing but crab roe was too rich, it was nauseating. By halfway through, he was forcing it down. The beasts, however, had much bigger stomachs and ate voraciously, their jaws snapping away. Liang Qu was more than happy to see them devour more, hoping they could accumulate enough essence of the waters to evolve into a Jiaomu crocodile and a spotted tiger fish. The names alone sounded fierce, and their evolved forms would surely be even more powerful. By then, taking down another crab monster wouldn't be as hard as today's ordeal. For now, Liang Qu served as their unpaid laborer, tirelessly extracting and cooking meat. What couldn't be cooked in time, he laid out on the boat's deck to dry in the sun, using high temperatures to kill bacteria and extend its shelf life. Anything left uncooked was tossed to the beasts to devour directly. The crab monster was massive. There was no need to break the shell, he could just reach in and scoop out all the snow-white meat. When the meat was gone, Liang Qu didn't even spare the crab gills. He washed them and cooked them too. Although humans might get sick from eating the part that filtered impurities, the beasts had no such qualms and devoured them all. Before gaining sentience, these creatures swallowed crabs whole without washing them. Now, at least they had cleaned them once. After eating, Liang Qu started practicing his punches to speed up digestion. Half an hour later, he began eating again. The consumed essence of the waters, accompanied by his constant focus on absorbing thoughts, was rapidly depleted to improve the Z-spirit fusion rate of his water monkey. Every 15 minutes, the fusion rate on the panel visibly ticked upward. Countless radiant dots escaped from the cauldron of the waters and merged into the illusory image of the spirit monkey. Unbeknownst to Liang Qu, a faint white-haired spirit monkey silhouette appeared behind him, barely visible from an outside perspective. In the water near the small boat, Can't Move and the fat catfish swam wildly, trying to expend their internal energy. But as the phantom appeared, a profound sense of reverence surged within them, causing them to stop in their tracks. They glanced around but found nothing unusual until their gaze fell on Liang Qu, squatting at the bow of the boat. Immediately, they understood the source. Their master was becoming more terrifying by the day. Meanwhile, Liang Qu's body underwent deeper changes. The increase in Z-spirit fusion not only enhanced his innate abilities but also improved his physical attributes. Thanks to this, Liang Qu didn't outright collapse the first time he used his command rune to dominate the pig-woman dragon. By around 4 p.m., Liang Qu had prepared 4 meals in a row, working shirtless on the boat. His entire body was flushed crimson like blood. His body temperature soared unnaturally high, yet he felt no discomfort. Sweat poured out and evaporated, leaving only traces of salt and grease. Liang Qu punched with all his might, using ape fist to burn off the excess energy. The moment he moved, a powerful sensation surged within him, intensifying with every breath. With each inhale and exhale, arrows of white mist shot from his mouth and nose. Contracting and expanding, rolling endlessly. At one point, Liang Qu felt an almost erupting heat flow within his mouth and nose. But with his relentless punching, the heat stayed just shy of bursting out. It was agonizing. Liang Qu gritted his teeth, suppressing it, he dared not spit blood. The surging qi and blood within his chest grew from the thickness of half a chopstick to the width of a pinky finger, and it was still increasing. A pinky finger's width. According to Hu Qi, this signified reaching the threshold for skin tempering. Yet Liang Qu had no idea what to do next. It. I should have asked him earlier. Why does he always act all mysterious and refuse to explain when it counts? Is this a cliffhanger in a novel? The unrelenting waves of heat made Liang Qu's head foggy, but he endured and guided the energy upward. Grow thicker, grow stronger. From his observations, the thicker his internal qi, the better his physical condition. Practicing more couldn't hurt. He didn't know how much time had passed, but after endless punching, the boiling sensation finally subsided. Liang Qu slowed his movements, sensing the heat flow within his body gradually fading. His qi, now as thick as an index finger, was leagues beyond its earlier state. Even after he stopped moving, it didn't dissipate immediately but continued to circulate robustly. Liang Qu exhaled deeply, releasing a stream of pure white mist that stretched over 3 feet. The cool wind caressed his body, and his skin, as red as a cooked prawn, quickly returned to a healthy, rosy hue. His muscles were smooth and toned without being bulky, and his obliques subtly revealed shark-like contours, rising and falling like gills with each breath. Every movement carried more power and ease, and a single punch now came with a faint whistling sound. Amazing. Liang Qu's mind cleared, and he noticed another unique advantage, or perhaps an existing one he'd never appreciated so fully. Others ate treasure fish and only gained the energy within the flesh. But when he ate, he not only absorbed the meat's energy but also gained a portion of the essence of the waters. The essence of the waters fueled the Z spirit, which in turn enhanced his physical attributes. Like a high-capacity battery, one charge stronger than 6. Double the energy. He activated the Cauldron of the waters. Greater than Cauldron Master. Liang Qu greater than refined Z spirit. Water monkey white fusion rate, 36.6%. Greater than essence of the waters. None greater than river affinity. None greater than commanded water beasts. Taihua crocodile, 6-whiskered catfish greater than evaluation. The Z spirit of the water monkey originates from the great Huai Whirlpool Lord. For a small, insignificant person, its potential is limited but not without value. Across 4 meals, Liang Qu had accumulated a total of 33.2 points of essence of the waters. Though it wasn't fully utilized yet, he estimated it would be by nightfall. If the water monkey fusion rate were a progress bar, he had filled half of it in one go. He could now control up to 300 jin of water, easily lifting 2 adult men at once. Unfortunately, his finer control over water hadn't improved much, but Liang Qu was already satisfied. Greater than 41.4 points of essence of the waters can evolve the Taihua crocodile into a Jiaomu crocodile. Greater than 46.7 points of essence of the waters can evolve the 6-whiskered catfish into a spotted tiger fish. Checking the energy requirements for the beast's evolution revealed a significant reduction. By his calculations, a single crab monster, even with some waste, contributed nearly 100 points of essence of the waters. Wait, there's still more. Liang Qu looked at the remaining 13 crab eggs. His mental capacity was limited, so he couldn't command them all. The leftovers would have to be eaten. Time to pick the best one. Liang Qu brought the crab's abdominal flap onto the boat and examined the eggs under sunlight. The crabs inside had grown substantially, almost breaking through their membranes. It was easy to determine their size, vitality, and gender. He discarded the weak, undersized ones and any that lacked vitality. Only 2 were suitable, but 1 was female. It wasn't about bias, female crabs were just smaller. If he were selecting subordinates, he needed the strongest warriors. It's decided. It'll be you. Liang Qu cut his finger and inscribed a water rune on the back of the chosen egg. Thank you for watching. Continue exploring the fascinating world of Chinese novels with us. Hit that subscribe button on Chinese Novel Audio Wave to stay updated with our latest stories. And never miss out on a great listen.